whirlwind
So we are.
happen, whereas the glue is
Everybody?
instant.
We're on. This is a meeting of the Athens Board of Zoning Appeals. It's 7 p.m. The meeting is now called to order. The date is
First Tuesday of each
November
month.
14. The board consists of 5 members and 1 alternate. Actually, we have 2 alternates, only one's here this evening. The alternate takes full part in discussions of the board and becomes a voting member in the absence or conflict of interest of a regular member. Present this evening are members Betty Hollow, Roger Gruser, Greg Lavelle,
John Golsey.
And our alternate Hector Flores. And you are...
He's the only alternate tonight.
He's the only alternate
He's the
who's
full
here this
member.
evening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because Greg is... Greg, are you still... Oh, that's...
No, he is not.
I'm not an
No,
alternate.
I didn't call you an alternate.
No, you didn't call me that, but
Didn't you just
See,
point this
Well, you
out?
said
You
you
gave
said
me
there
the
was
look.
2 alternates.
Well, we do have 2 alternates. That's right, it is. Disregard all that. All right. This meeting is proceeding, and we're all here, and I'm Muriel Frederick, the confused chair. Also present this evening are zoning administrator Steve Pearson, Paul Eschenbacher, our acting secretary, and Michael Miller from the City Law Director's Office. The board operates according to the following procedure. The chair will name and describe the case. The zoning administrator will cite the specifics of the refusal. The appellant or representative then will state the case for granting the appeal. Testimony next will be taken from those who support granting of the appeal, then those who wish to speak in general comment, and those who support denial of the appeal. Following all testimonies, the board will receive concluding remarks from the appellant. Discussion from the floor then will be closed. The board will deliberate and render a decision. Under Athens City Code, Section 230703B, the board has the power to grant such variances from the code as will not be contrary to the public interest, so that the spirit of the code shall be observed, public safety and welfare secured, and substantial justice done. Athens City Code, Section 230910C, requires that variances from the code shall not be granted unless the board makes specific findings of fact based directly on the evidence provided to it, that each and every one of the following 6 criteria are met. Practical difficulty or undue hardship. There must exist a practical difficulty or undue hardship caused by exceptional circumstances pertaining to the specific piece of property. Exceptional circumstances. There must exist exceptional circumstances or conditions applying to the property or its intended use that do not in general apply to properties in the same zoning district. Then preservation of equal property rights. It must be determined that literal interpretation of the code would deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same vicinity, while granting the variance would not convey a special privilege. Then the 4th was minimum variance. It must be determined the variance is the minimum required to make reasonable use of the property. And absence of detriment, it must be determined that the granting of the variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent properties, nor materially impair the purposes of the code or the public interest. And the last one, not of a general nature. The variance sought must not be of a general or recurring nature, such that the situation would more reasonably be handled by changing the law. Are we doing anything other than variances tonight? No. Any person who is aggrieved by the decision of the board may file an appeal to the Court of Common Pleas. Such petition must be filed within 30 days after the mailing of the board's resolution to the appellant. Tonight there are 4 cases on the agenda. Number 0624V for 547 East State Street, which is Zone B3. Panich and Knoll Architects are the appellants. Number 0625V for 102 West Union Street, which is Zone B1. Abdi Sheikh is the appellant, or Sheikh. Number 0628V for 61 Columbia Avenue, zoned R1. Christine Elland is the appellant, and near number 0629V for 38 North Court Street, which is zone B2D, secure parking is the appellant. The board is required by law to take testimony under oath. Anyone wishing to speak, please stand to be sworn. Do you swear that the testimony you will give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Our first case today then, although I understand it might be continued or requested to be continued, is it still, it's number 0624V for 547 East State Street. Is that indeed going to be continued or requesting continuance
Excuse me,
again?
my name's Steve Pearson. I'm the zoning administrator for the city. When I was getting ready to set the agenda, I contacted Mike Knoll. He had asked to have his case continued from 2 meetings ago, and I asked him, did he want to be on this agenda? And he said he was still considering the option of possibly just having Applebee's build their own sign and the Holiday Inn build their own, rather than have this combination sign. But, you know, final determination had not yet been made.
So they're not wanting just to withdraw, they definitely want to continue continuing. How
Yeah.
long can they continue to continue?
The policies and procedures of the board don't state an exact amount of times that you can continue.
Okay, so it's,
That's something that could be added to the policies and procedures, I suppose. And I suppose it's at the discretion of the board
Right.
if they wish to continue or
well, I
not.
thought I would just ask everybody if it's fine, but I imagine no one has any objections to it being continued again?
It would be my opinion that at the next meeting, if they don't want to have their case heard, that the board dismiss the case.
Well, since the year will be ending at that point, it might be appropriate. Then they could refile if they cared to.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Anybody can refile, well, at any time, and start a whole new 20-day appeal clock
Okay.
running.
All right, thank you. Well, then, you might as well just stay
Applebee's
there.
will probably be
because-
open by then, so. They won't have a sign or they'll be here.
All right. Well, then, the next case is 0625V for 102 West Union Street. Could you tell it they're requesting off-street parking requirements to be waived? Can you tell us the circumstances about this, please?
Right. In the packet of information I provided everyone, which is exactly the copy available for the public to review at my office anytime, there's a refusal that states the grounds for the refusal. In this particular case, it's because the parking requirements require that 6 parking spaces for a business of this square footage be provided, and the appellant is wishing to have a variance to have no parking on the site. The second page in the packet, usually what I try to do is provide you a zoning map, so you have a vicinity map of where the property is located. This particular property is on the right-hand side of Union Street as you go down the hill from the uptown area headed toward the old train station. When I came to work, it's been a long time, 12 years ago now, there was a Chinese restaurant in this facility. They ceased to operate, and Union Street Cafe started their business in this property. At the time, the parking requirements had an exception for smaller businesses. Parking wasn't required. But the parking regulations were changed recently, and so no business, whatever the size, has an exception from providing any parking. So that's why Union Street Cafe could go in with no parking. The law changed, and now parking has to be provided.
Well, actually, parking does exist. There's a metered parking in the front of the store, cafe, that's a parking.
Yeah,
People have to put money in it, and that's,
but it doesn't belong to the
yeah, but,
property.
you know, there's many other
So-
places that they don't have parking on site, but
What I also provided for you in the packet of information is a copy of the parking regulations. Table B,
Yeah,
2310, and it's called off-street parking requirements. So these are the parking spaces that are required off the street. So there are some metered parking spots on the street, but those are public and can't be applied by myself toward any use.
okay, thank you.
I also provided for you in the packet the code section, in particular that pertains to this. Actually, when I publish the agenda or when you see the refusals, anybody can go to the city's website, click on Law Director and click on City Code, and you can go directly to the sections that I reference. So that's available online and updated to within just a couple of months of the most current regulations. The biggest problem that happened when the Union Street Cafe moved out was that another business didn't go in within a year. Any kind of nonconformity is grandfathered for up to a year. Once that 1-year period goes by, all grandfathering is lost. And the property sat empty for 2 or 3 years, maybe 4. Union Street Cafe just moved up the street and into the old Gold Star Chili facility just up the street where there is parking.
Do you know if there have been any inquiries over that period of time from people interested in doing a business who determined that they couldn't do a business because they didn't have parking?
A couple of years ago, there was somebody in there doing some work. Code officer, I assigned a code officer to go down and talk to them about it and explain to them that they couldn't start a business there without parking. That was a couple of years ago, or without a variance. I don't know where, they just disappeared.
Yeah, okay.
But in any case, the current appellant would like to establish a coffee shop there, pretty much similar to a restaurant, it being the same use group. But it's the problem with that 1 year having gone by, that parking grandfathering
Okay.
was lost.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you. All right, then. And who is the appellant for? Oh, you weren't here when we had everyone swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You want to stand and be sworn? Yes, well, but you are the appellant for this business, right?
Yes.
Okay, well then, would you come to the podium? This is your opportunity, and I can swear you while you're there. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Sure.
Thank you. Would you state your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, Abdi Sheikh, 102 West Union Street.
Okay. This is your opportunity to tell us anything that you feel we need to know about your application and why we should be granting it.
Yeah, we were looking at this place for close to a couple months now, and we wanted to open a coffee shop. We looked around. I mean, when we got to this place, we talked to people in the city, and obviously, I mean, there's no way of providing a parking if we could, and there is no land that's close to that area that we could talk to, that we could build a parking. So we looked at the off-street parking, and we're also trying to talk to the people that's the mall that's just a couple blocks down, see if we can use their parking lot.
But you didn't have any success with that, or?
Not yet. We just want to see how things go here, and then we see what we. But I mean, with this business, I talked to the landlord. There's nothing. They would have to go ahead and demolish the building because with the parking, there's no way of, coming out with extra because there's no space available.
Did you have a question, Betty? Okay. So why did you choose a place to start a business where you couldn't have a business because there's no
There's
parking?
no other place available. I mean, we like the campus. We like OU. But there is no other place that was available.
And you're planning to, you're wanting
Open
to
a
be
coffee
within-
shop. And the other things, it used to be a restaurant, so you don't have to do the, I mean, it's zoned for.
It's already
zoned
out
for
there
that, yeah. So the only requirement is meeting the parking requirement.
Okay, well, does anybody have any questions for this applicant? No. Well, if you'd like to have a seat, then we don't have any further questions at this time. You'll have an opportunity to say, you'll have another opportunity to speak if you think something. Thank you. Is there anyone present who wants to speak in support of this variance request, or in general comment about it, or against it? Would you like to come to the podium and state your name and address for the record too, please?
I'm William Morgan and of 36 Cable Lane, and my partner and I own the property adjacent to it.
Okay.
I have some things to hand out to you.
Okay.
As I stated, we own the property next to it and have owned this property for a number of years. We do take issue with the parking. What I've shown on this drawing here is that, in fact, what you can see in what's labeled as C is 4 cars plus a van, as just an example of what parking could be. Over the years, I think what has happened is that this particular area might have been used as parking at one time because there's a curb cut, a tapered curb at the sidewalk all the way in front of that area. So at some point, it was probably parking. And over the years, who knows when, but it has been since then taken over, I think, by the Union Street Cafe as a little patio area. And there even had a fence between our property and their property, which has actually been moved. And we have a number of issues with this. One, first of all, there is a way to get parking. And the reason this is so important to us is that over our use of the parking and development of our parking, the cafe that existed there used our parking for their deliveries, and oftentimes was an inconvenience to our tenants. We took 2 buildings, as you can see on that page there. There's an E and an F on our parking in the building there. We took one building down that was located where the E is located, where our parking is, and spent almost $80,000 for parking. Retaining walls, concrete, drainage, sewer, the whole thing. And so when we looked at the building, those 2 buildings actually that were there, we spent a considerable amount of time looking at it and saying, yes, we can put this project together and we can make it work. But we spent $80,000 making parking. It seems a little unreasonable that someone else could come in and say, well, we don't want to do parking and we like the benefit of not having to spend any amount of money doing parking. So we're not only being penalized because of our financial investment, but also because our parking is being used by their delivery trucks. And sometimes their clientele would turn around in that area too. So I've shown here just roughly, as best I could off the plats, the size, location, and kind of labeled everything in place. My issues are with the loading and delivery. Their trash and sanitation's always been a problem. They continue to leave grease barrels right next to our property. They have no employee parking. In some cases, they would use our parking. Seldom, but in some cases. They're going to have to meet state codes in any respect, so they're going to need to put in a grease intercept, probably outside, and they're going to have to bring the whole building up to code. So if they're not financially able to make this building work now, they're in for some serious financial problems because this is going to require a lot of upgrade. Okay, so that's my position on it. So I guess in conclusion, I'd say I'm against it. They have options, and I'd rather not see it go in the way they're proposing.
Does anyone have any questions? Any questions?
Is C&E connected without any kind of barrier or wall or anything?
There's a curb between C and E right now. And C, remember, C is just a patio area right now, and there's actually a little driveway right where that van is, and a fence that they moved over kind of between the van and the 4 cars. So they kind of shifted that fence over, which was really separating the 2 properties, but now it's not. And what happens is that they put the old restaurant, I'm not sure what the new tenant's going to do, but the old restaurant used that for some staff parking. They stacked a couple cars in there. So when the big delivery trucks came in, they came in and parked in our parking lot and blocked our tenants and made a mess there. So
that patio area is actually part of this property.
that's correct. Part of the appellant's property there.
And I didn't notice when I went by, but you say that there's a curb cut there?
There's a tapered curb. The curb comes along in front of the bike shop and in front of the original restaurant and then tapers off. I'm just suggesting that because, I mean, it's there, but at some point that must have been used as parking because someone
Yeah.
went over that curb to get to that area. And that's been a long time ago, but it's available.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? All right, thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
Is there anyone else here who wants to speak? Well then, Mr. Chake, it's your opportunity for a rebuttal if you'd like to.
Most of our business is it's gonna be a walk business. I mean, I'd probably say 90% of the business is gonna be walk-in students. I mean, that's the niche market. And the other thing is Grease Trap. We're not cooking anything there. It's just a purely coffee shop. So yeah, I don't see the need for Grease Trap.
Well, I don't know what the state, requirements might be. It's possible that any food service would be required, but maybe Mr. Pearson would know, but that isn't, what we're here to decide this evening in any case.
No, I mean, we have a coffee shop in Columbus, and Grease Trap is not. It wasn't one of the requirements.
It's not something that we need to decide about. However, it seems that it is possible to provide parking on your property. It would seem so, anyway, from the testimony we just heard. Had you given some thought to using that area for parking?
I mean, if the patio, we can make that into parking, if it can be done,
Mm-hmm.
we're willing to try.
Okay.
But that's
Well,
the only.
let me see, how many parking places are they required to have? Hmm?
Six.
They would still be too short.
Well,
Yeah.
4 is better than none.
Yeah, but yeah, you would have to have a variance for 2 parking places rather than 6, which would make the variance a lot, closer to being minimum. So would you be interested in that case in having the variance request be phrased in that way?
What, adding 2 additional?
To request a variance for 2 parking places rather
Yeah,
than
but
6?
You're saying if we go ahead and turn the drive?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if we can, yeah, we can do that.
Are-
That's gonna-
Is anyone certain though that you can create 4 parking spaces there?
Do we
That's-
know
Is
the
there enough
dimensions of
space
the
there?
space?
I mean, it would be unrealistic to tell him to create 4 and he doesn't have the room to
Exactly.
create 4.
Yeah, I don't think that place would fit 4.
This
Well,
looks kind of narrow to me.
Exactly.
I know, but we don't actually have the dimensions, so we're just sort of guessing around here.
Right, that's
so-
what I'm saying. Can someone
So
furnish
does
Well-
this?
anybody- Okay, let's ask, Mr. Pearson, do you know the dimensions?
Yeah. Could you, won't you, please?
For establishing new parking, you have to have stalls at least 180 square feet in area, at least 9 feet width minimum. And the code says there has to be adequate provision for ingress and egress as determined by the zoning administrator. I just used a standard engineering book to calculate if you can actually turn in and out of the spaces. You can I've approved parking off of 10-foot alleys before. It's pretty hard to turn off a 10-foot alley perpendicular into a parking spot, but it's not impossible. You have to kind of jimmy jockey back a couple times in order to get in and out. But 31 feet would probably be enough.
Is that what he's got? 31?
That's what the drawing indicated.
Okay.
However,
Let's do-
the landscape ordinance requires around parking areas, less than 25 cars and less than 7,000 square feet in area, a 4-foot buffer along the front property, an 8-foot buffer along the front property line. So you have to take 8 feet off right away off the property to plant trees in. There's no requirement to plant a tree between the parking and the building. And then for smaller parking areas, you need a 4-foot buffer between you and the adjacent property owner, and 4 feet at the rear also. So if you take 31 feet, knock off 4 for landscaping, doesn't fit.
Well, we could waive the landscaping thing, though.
No,
In-
only the
in
tree
variance?
commission can grant consolidations from the strict requirements of the landscape ordinance.
So the tree commission essentially would be able to refuse, would be able to refuse him the use of the property.
I thought they were an advisory group.
Originally, when the landscape ordinance was passed, it required that the Board of Zoning Appeals grant variances. At the first revision of the landscape ordinance, council revised that to say that the tree commission can grant consolidations, and any review or appeal to the Board of Zoning Appeals was eliminated from the ordinance. So they can grant consolidations. The ordinance doesn't specifically say that they approve or refuse. It says that they can review and approve consolidations of planting.
What do you mean a consolidation of planting?
Normally what they do is they count up the amount of green space would be required and the number of trees, and they just have them placed, excuse me, somewhere other than where the strict
Right.
regulations apply. For example, I want to say, I just saw something from the Tree Commission, the 4.5 acres where CVS, Applebee's, and the new hotel and all that out there, the landscape ordinance requires, I believe it was 169 trees to be planted there. So what they do is they count up the total number of trees and put them somewhere else.
Do window boxes count?
No. It's the Shade Tree Commission.
I have a question.
And this applies to anything that's done in the uptown area as well as new?
It's a citywide ordinance, applies to all parking.
I have a question for you, Steve. That's 31 foot wide. If we take 4 foot off of that for the space that they need to dedicate to their neighbor, that
Right,
leaves
you're down
27. And you say they have to be 9 foot wide?
9 foot
9
minimum.
goes into 27 3 times.
Um,
Could we create 3 parking spaces that would just be, you just drive in? And that would take care of that gentleman's concerns regarding having a delivery area, for example?
Well, to be real honest with you, this caught me all off by
Yeah.
surprise.
This
I wasn't,
being the
I'm
case-
just talking off the top of my head about parking right
Would-
now.
would
This
you-
was not part of my review.
Would you be interested in continuing this until next month, when you might be able to find out whether it's possible to provide some parking here that would meet the requirements of the tree
Is-
commission?
Or at least a delivery area.
Yeah.
I don't think, personally, I don't think the parking is as big an issue, because your customers, it hurts
They
you
are
if you
gonna
don't have,
walk.
parking. But you need to have a facility to load and unload.
Would you like, and you can continue this till next month if you would like to.
And you could consult Mr. Morgan, if he'll help you decide the
And,
sizes.
yeah, in consultation with your neighbor there, you might be able to work
And
out
Mr.
something that would be
Pearson?
agreeable.
There could be some parking provided that met the landscape ordinance,
Yeah.
but it would still require a parking variance.
It was-
for
yeah,
every-
Austin,
but-
Right,
you know,
well,
and then he works out with his
But
neighbor.
I
Yeah.
think that would be an option.
Yeah, so how about,
It's another, parking variance, it's another hearing.
Yes.
it would be,
Next-
basically,
next month.
you'd be able to go and talk it over with, you would have the opportunity to do some further investigation of what you actually would be able to physically do and what might satisfy your neighbor's concerns. And then you would be able to come back to us with information
plan.
that might make it easier for us to find for you.
But I
Might
need to,
make it
do I need
easier.
to consult with the parking variance and see what they say and then
You
come back and
you
talk to you
need
guys?
to actually be sure of the dimensions of this space
Okay.
and what might be possible in it, and then try to figure out what could you possibly do that would satisfy the tree commission and that might make it possible for us to say, yes, we might give you a variance for something here, but for you to come and say, well, we just can't park, when there's testimony that you could do something, then we're not sure what to do in that circumstance.
Okay, what if
We don't
I-
have enough information.
Yeah, what if I went down the street and there's the plaza, and I got
To
a,
the HDL Center, I don't
Yeah.
think we'd rather have you park on site
We're looking for a facility to load and unload, is what I'm
and
looking
park some
for.
cars.
And park some cars.
And I don't, personally, I don't care about your car parking, because that affects your customers. But you really ought to have a facility there to handle deliveries and.
I think you better look for more than that, because we may not all agree with Mr. Cruiser.
Your,
There's somebody who wants to
I'd
speak.
like to offer something.
It would go a little bit out of order, but please do. And Mr. Sheikh, you will have the last opportunity to speak, but, okay.
Believe it or not, I would encourage this restaurant or coffee shop. I really do. And it'd be nice for the neighborhood. But I still see the parking issue, and I know that we run into this parking issue virtually every month, where people are being denied the use of a building because they don't have enough parking. That's a whole other issue. There is a place and a way to put parking here. In fact, I might even suggest that out front, there's one spot where it says 31, there's a parking spot right there where the D is. And that could be a loading zone also, so you could pick up, I mean, after the loading zone time, that's just street parking. But they would also be able to put, more cars in there and handle that. As far as the trees are concerned, half of the lot is trees. It goes right up the hill. There's 50 trees on this lot already. So for someone to say, well, we have to have 4 more trees or 3 more trees, which is not really, I guess, your issue, but it's ludicrous to say, well, we need to have more trees in this
Well,
particular area.
thank you for that input.
So, I mean, the whole hillside is trees.
Thank you.
And we wouldn't deny, we would certainly go along with the parking in some configuration like this. Both of our accesses are parallel, and so for them to swing a little bit over on ours or vice versa, that's not a problem. Okay?
All right, thank you.
Why not?
And you swore earlier, right? Oh, of course you did. Well, come on up. Please do, but
I'll just be very brief. It's just interesting to me because I eat at the Union Street Diner about twice a week for lunch, which is just up the street from where this facility is going to go in. And I understand Bill's concern without a doubt in terms of deliveries and having something close by. But I'm serious that in the last 6 months, I park on the street to eat at the, I mean, there's always usually parking available, at least some parking available on the street. And I've never not gone to lunch because I couldn't find a place to eat or place to park on Union Street.
well, that's
At that
helpful.
part. I mean, just for your information.
Okay, well, we'll keep it in mind for next month. Hopefully, it'll be next month. All right, Mr. Sheikh, would you like to come back up now?
I just want to say.
Okay. And did you have something?
Yeah. It was suggested that maybe you want to pull your plan off, come back next week or next month with a better plan. Because right now, it seems like it's still not, it doesn't feel like it's a whole thing. You can't show me a good plan. Or there's some conjecture of how many you can do this and you can do that. Working with Steve and your neighbor may also start a good working relationship as well. So if I may suggest, strongly suggest that you pull this application, come back next month with a good plan, how many parking spaces, what you can do, what you can't do, and present it back to the board. If we vote on it tonight, that's final.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
we'll
the
continue.
problem. If we vote on it tonight and you don't get your variance, then you don't have a variance, then you've got to, you just don't have anything.
Yeah, we'll continue to.
Okay.
Thank
Is
you.
that everyone's agreed that continuance is a good idea? Yep. Then we'll continue it till next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is yours.
Okay. All right, then.
Would you have a preference between meeting and not meeting the landscape requirements?
Since
Probably be able
we're
to get
not
an
allowed
extra-
to have a preference, but it sounds as if he can meet the landscape requirements. It would be good if that could be addressed.
Right. I
But-
think
and-
there's a
and-
plan that, you could come up with a plan that would provide some parking and meet the landscape requirements, but it's going to probably diminish the parking by at least one spot.
Well,
So,
but what about all those trees in the back?
Why would
If
not the
they're
trees
on
that
the
currently
property?
exist not be sufficient to meet the landscape requirements?
We'll
the
consolidate.
landscape requirements require one shade tree for every 30 feet of perimeter parking area or portion thereof in order to shade the car and to diminish heat sink and to paved areas.
Gotcha. All right,
So-
then it might be good
There are
to
lots
have
of
that
trees
be-
back there, but and where the sun comes
But
up and
that's the
down.
consolidation notion then. That's what,
Right,
only the
because-
tree commission can do that. We can't do it. So he
Right.
might need to come to us with it already stated that the tree commission has agreed that he's consolidated already.
Well, I guess that's what I was getting to. You want
Yeah.
a tree compliant plan or as close to parking compliant plan?
A
or-
tree,
Well, we
I
want,
would
we want the
suggest,
parking first.
Steve, you use your judgment on that.
Okay.
think we would
Well, I
go
can
with-
probably get an additional parking spot, but that'll also require then a trip to the tree commission. So that's,
Well, then
that's not that
that
hard to
would-
do either.
That would be with the,
And it might take more than a
Plan.
month to do that. They meet once a month. And, well, if they got a meeting coming up between now and the next meeting or not, I have
that
to
would be
look at.
between you guys over there, you know, and if he wants to hold it for in January or whatever, but I'd like to see a better plan.
Sounds like more parking
Yes.
we
rather
would,
than more trees.
we would all like to see more parking.
No one else
But-
And I
on
don't
that street
disagree.
has
It's a
trees.
huge hillside with lots of trees. They're just
Right.
not in the proper location.
Right. This is,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Steve.
Moving right along here, we have next, case number 0628V for 61 Columbia Avenue. Christina Eland, would you like to come and state, oh, well, that's all right, please come and state your case. I think we'll deal with, normally I have Steve say why he told you couldn't have it first, but won't you, this will all come out, so go ahead.
I'm Christine Eland. I live at 61 Columbia, and I have a home occupation as a yoga instructor, which I've had for 25 years. Been paying city taxes on that income for 9 years, and we teach yoga classes in our home currently, and I have a conditional use permit to do that. And when I applied to use the exercise room that we built above our new garage, it was denied because the code says that home occupation has to come in through the residence. Isn't that how, I think that's how it says. You have to enter through the residence to use a space for the home occupation. And so the code would have us, correct me if I'm wrong, the code would have us then connect the house 45 feet to the garage so that people would come in the front door to go to the studio, and it would be considered one building.
Okay.
So I think I said that right.
Yes.
So that's the case, and our variance request was simply that we not have to connect the house to the garage. I think pictures might be helpful.
Sure.
And did you bring them?
Yes,
Oh,
is this
good.
okay time to?
Yes, this would be a very handy time for anybody who hasn't already seen the house to get some idea of it.
I know, I appreciated the visit of those of you that did come to see it. You'll have to share the picture. This is actually what it looks like from the street, which is virtually that you can't see anything because we have such good cover. But this is the garage, and this is the house, and this is the 45 feet between it. Our main concern is the loss of viewscape. If we connect the house to the garage, we lose our view of the Hocking River Valley and all the mountains and all the trees that we originally bought the property to enjoy. And we don't think that it really serves the public in any way because they're going to have the view cut to from the street. They're going to look up, and instead of seeing blue sky and trees and this kind of a natural viewscape, there's going to be a long blue tunnel across from the house to the garage. And really, the thing we love about Athens is that we cherish what it looks like. We cherish that we're still a small town in many ways anyway, and I would like to protect the viewscape myself. We do have, I know you asked for people to speak on behalf or against, and since I didn't know how to get people to come, frankly, on a work night, I did get all of the main residents around me, down Columbia, up Short Street, up Roosevelt Avenue, to sign a petition in favor of the variance. And I marked the residents that signed on this map. So those are the people speaking in favor of the variance for me. I don't know if people have questions. I guess since I wrote the variance, I'm not quite sure what it is I'm supposed to say, so do you want to ask me questions, or?
Yeah, is this activity requires any like music or sound or anything that?
No, it'll be very unobtrusive to the neighborhood. It's taught in silence. It doesn't require a sign. It doesn't require anything. People will park where they would if they were coming into my house or if they were going up to the studio. They'll park.
And how many
in the
people
driveway.
would you expect to have at any given time?
Generally, the classes average about 6. The largest class that I've ever had is 10. Right now,
And
my
those
class-
10 people coming with 10 different cars, where are they going to be parking the cars?
We have parking in our driveway. It's 161 feet long, and it's double wide at the top, and 2-car garage and a space at the bottom. So I have plenty of parking, actually. But our experience so far is then that people have been carpooling. 2 to 3 people come in one vehicle. And we've lived there for 12 years. We've never had any problem with anybody backing out of our driveway or turning around at the top of our driveway.
And before you began teaching in your home, you were teaching
At Ohio
at the
University
university.
Ping Center.
Right.
But was there a time when you had the studio inside the house?
Well, we do right now because I have a conditional use permit, but I can only fit about 4 to 5 people in my living room for a class, and I don't know if I can really make a living with 4 to 5 people in a class.
That garage has been there several years, hasn't it?
We just put up a new garage, sir. We had a single-car garage there, and we had a structural engineer to ask if we could move it closer to the house, and he said, no, you should build it right where it was. We're on a cliff of rock.
Yeah, I know where it is.
Yeah, and so there was a single-car garage there, and we just finished a 2.5-car garage.
So how many classes are there per day?
There's not even one every day. There's probably 2 to 3 a week, not every week of the year. Not even every month of the year, actually.
So what parking do they utilize? You have?
They come up the driveway. We have plenty of parking.
Good.
There's not a parking problem. I did bring this, I think. 161 feet long, and it's double wide at the top, and this is going up the driveway, and this is the stop sign on Columbia heading toward town.
What year did you get your conditional use permit?
We just got it. I've been teaching at the university, so we just got the conditional use permit
So,
2
From
months
whom?
ago.
from Steve, from the code enforcement office.
They don't need to come through us.
Apparently not.
No,
Not for conditional use.
Oh, yes.
just for home
Ordinarily.
occupation.
Really?
Okay. Yeah, Steve will come up
Oh,
and explain
yes,
that
we
shortly.
did all the
Normally we
Like,
get,
assume
normally we get
Just
them
does.
here, but,
Since they've already got one, didn't come in front of us,
Didn't come.
they didn't need to.
so what you've been doing is instructing, and so it's a studio, rather like a dance studio or a other kind of
Well, it's much quieter.
instructional setting, excepting it's quieter than a dance studio. But it's an instructional setting. It's not a retail business
No, there's no
kind of
retail.
setting. It's not a business setting. It's
No.
a school setting.
Right, people are not going to be there except to come to class. Classes
Yeah.
are an hour and a half, so the most that anybody's there is 2 hours, 15 minutes before and 15 minutes after.
Let
There's no
class
sign.
grow.
There isn't room, sir, in the studio.
But the number of
For 10.
classes might perhaps grow.
I have to do all the teaching myself, so I can't teach more than 2-3 times a week.
And you're not going to have any other employees in there to come and teach, right?
Well, my husband would fill in, my husband is a
Okay.
registered teacher.
It says in here, not more than one person who is not a resident, so, and if you have
Oh,
more
outside.
than one, okay.
No,
It's a home occupation and it's a school, so, okay. Does
It's a
anybody else
business.
have any questions?
it's really more of a school because we're trying to teach life skills of relaxation and stress management, essentially. We could actually go after school status, but don't really think.
But even so, it's a business. Yeah, it's a business that happens to be an educational one, stress relieving one, whichever.
hopefully. Do you
Does
have
anyone
any
else have
other
any-
questions?
Okay, let me clarify this again. You have a conditional use permit to do the classes in your house?
As a home occupation.
Okay. And as soon as they move out to the garage, they're no longer a home operation. We'll get Mr. Pearson maybe to clarify that.
Well, it would still be a home occupation.
Yeah, right. I guess that's,
If the home occupation is, it's because she doesn't have a tunnel.
I know,
That it's
but-
not a home
okay,
occupation
so
over
the-
the
It
garage.
still wouldn't be your primary residence, even if she had a tunnel.
Well, it would be if it's attached.
That's what it is.
dumb.
That's
If
what
it's
they're
attached, if
asking
it's
for.
attached, then it's part of the primary residence. If it's not
Well, that's
attached, it's
foolish.
a, it's a,
You'd call it
um,
frogs at chunks.
it's an outbuilding.
Excellent.
So, because it's not attached.
well, I have a question for Mr. Pearson, and Ms.
Okay.
Elan, we
You
maybe
get,
will
you'll
have
have
both
an
of you later.
opportunity
Okay.
at the end to speak again.
So what's the rationale for not allowing the use of a business in the accessory structure? Why was
Well, in the
that?
packet of information I provided you, I have the applicable sections, 230401,
I can read
B4, and
Yeah, I
B7,
read it.
on
Right.
which
I
I
don't understand.
made the determination that
Legislative.
would not be permitted unless it was in the house. I think there's a little
Well, I
confusion.
know, but do you understand why that would have been the case? What would be the reason for that?
Several years ago, the only kinds of home occupations that were permitted, and I think some board members remember this, were millinery, home cooking,
Right, doctor's offices, blah, 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 okay.
yeah, it was a very old ordinance.
Right.
And we had a Professor Dr. Finger that lived at the corner
I
of
remember that,
Central
yes.
and Clark Street,
And he
who
wanted
was
to do
refused a
computer
permit
stuff.
for a home occupation where he basically just used the computer
Right.
and sent information about enhanced agricultural production to third world countries overseas.
Right,
And given that, and essentially more the proliferation of home occupations, basically using computers and just having a small office in your house, when the zoning code was revised recently, it included home occupations that
Right.
had been limited to sewing things and cooking things before
Right.
only. Professional offices were always permitted
right.
in your principal residence, doctor, dentist. We had a court case about what is a professional office. Judge Goldsberry determined that, I believe it was Judge Goldsberry determined that a real estate office was not a professional office in that particular case. That was when Athens Rental Management had a real estate office at 121 East State Street. That happened right when I first came to work for the city. So the code was recently revised to allow you to have some kind of occupation in your own home. You could use 50% of the area. I'm trying to explain the rationale.
Okay,
It also, before, you weren't allowed to have anybody help you with your home occupation. Planning Commission and Council considered having up to 2 people help you, but they finally scaled that back to
Right.
1. There wasn't any language about parking or about signage that was included.
well, it does
But
say
what about-
something here about a sign, or any sign other than authorized herein and not including blah, 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 blah. But still, why can't you have the home occupation in the outbuilding?
That's,
230401B7 says, "Other customary accessory uses are permitted and buildings, provided that the uses are incidental to the principal use, which would be residential, and do not include any activity commonly conducted as business." So there's a prohibition about conducting business in an accessory structure.
But we still don't know why that prohibition exists.
that's what we're trying to find out. What's
That's what
the
I'm,
reason? I
I'm
mean,
just
what-
asking you to
if we're-
speculate.
if
What
we're
would be
gonna-
so dangerous
if
about
you-
having it in the garage?
What's the purpose of the code
Because
here?
someone then could have an auto repair business. They could do iron working. They could do
But
any
it-
kinds of things
but
that
it-
might more highly impact the neighborhood than, an obvious quiet yoga
But it already
class in the
specified the
garage.
It's already
kind of
said what
permitted
you can do.
accessory uses.
It doesn't have a list of some are permitted and some are not permitted. It just, that's why we have appeals.
They- so
Professional
essentially,
offices
they-
and home occupations are permitted, but they're just not permitted in the garage.
Right.
Essentially,
And
what
why
they're,
is-
Because you could expand it.
what they're
I
trying
guess,
to
and make it
do
more
is
noisy.
make certain that whatever it is you do can be done in your home, and you can't repair a fender on a
But you could
car in
say
your
that
home.
you're-
shop.
I think that might have been some of the
Well, it's-
rationale.
but you could
Because
say that you-
some
that
home,
you're-
some home
Sure.
occupations,
Repairing
for example, I'm a carpenter, and if I lived in town and I had an accessory structure, I could be running a planer all
Sure.
night long.
Yep.
Grinders,
Okay, so
joiners.
it's to avoid impacting the neighborhood adversely, and so that, then we can
That's my-
be
it's
The
guided.
way they limited it, what
So
you
we can
could
be
do
guided by the
without getting
intention of the
into
code. The
each
intention
thing.
of the code is to keep it from impacting negatively on the neighborhood. So we can determine whether this would impact negatively on the neighborhood, and it would work nicely, so,
Yep.
okay?
Right. The garage was
understand.
recently added to, remodeled, and there was a large area that was permitted. The Elans asked for a permit when they remodeled their garage. When they realized that they couldn't have an accessory, or excuse me, a business use in the accessory structure, they came to my office and did obtain an accessory use permit. It's not a conditional, that the term was used conditional.
Well, why can't they continue that?
They
Why?
can, they do have that permit.
Well, for the garage?
No, not for the garage.
Oh.
Section 7 prohibits any activity commonly conducted as business in an accessory structure.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, but so.
Is that true for all zones? Or just this zone?
All zones.
The use of accessory structures are different in different zones.
Okay.
So you're
Um,
saying that that accessory permit would not be allowed to be attached to the garage?
No, Section B7 prohibits that.
That's, yeah, but we found out why B7 was written.
And I would, when you were talking about educational kinds of things too, I don't know if you guys probably remember the case on Ohio Avenue where the old church was
Yeah.
to be converted, when the dance studio had to leave over on Factory Street. And the board determined at that time, because the appellant made presentation that the activities there qualified for physical education requirements for homeschooled children. Therefore, it was a school, and the case, they didn't need a variance, they could just move in there.
Because schools are allowed.
Right, and the presentation at that time was because because I looked at it first as a business activity and hesitated to permit it that way without the board's review. And then when you saw that continuing education requirements for homeschool, or
Right,
educational,
But then you
physical
didn't get
education
tangled up with
requirements.
the accessory stuff, so.
Right.
What
So
blows-
even in the zone, even in zones, different types of uses are,
What kind of
Same
blows
zone.
a hole in this whole theory to me is that if you get that permit to have it in your home, and all you have to do is connect your garage to it, so you've got your garage out there and you're repairing cars and stuff because you got a walkway connecting it to your house. Is that
yeah, that's a possibility.
Well,
I'm not sure that's what they had in mind.
The trouble, though, is it limits it somewhat because if you do have a home occupation in your house, the entrance has to be from within the dwelling itself. So you have to go through your house, to get to this other, it can't have a separate entrance of its own.
okay, thank you.
But if you
I'm-
connect, then you're gonna change the setbacks rules that applies, right? The,
Well, that's a whole different situation.
Yeah.
I've had architects tell me that if they had a 2x4 long enough and they put one nail in here and nailed one up over here, it was connected. So, I can't hardly speculate unless I see something to determine if it's one building or two buildings connected by it.
Well, thank you.
before.
Okay, well, does anybody else have any questions for Steve? Are we all set? Thank you, Steve, for clarifying all that. I would like, at this point, to read into the record the people who were speaking in favor by this. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 neighbors who have signed this statement. We, the undersigned, support the variance request submitted by Christine and David Eland of 61 Columbia. The variance seeks exemption from the requirement to attach their house to their garage in order to use the exercise room above the new garage for yoga classes, which are part of her home occupation. We live in the ANNA neighborhood and travel Columbia Avenue with regularity. So these neighbors are supporting it with reference to it being an intrusive activity. It seems like the neighbors don't feel that it is. That's in support. Is there anyone here who would like to speak against granting the variance? There's no one here speaking against granting the variance. would you like to say anything, again, to complete as rebuttal or anything to anything Steve has said? All right, in that case, then, everything from the floor is closed, and we're ready to talk about the variance. Or would anybody like to frame a proposal for that variance?
I move that we grant a variance to the property located at 61 Columbia Avenue, case number 06-28V, Zone R1. Appellant is requesting a variance from section 23.04.01B7 to permit home occupation in an accessory structure where activity in an accessory structure commonly conducted as business is prohibited.
I'd like to add a condition to that, if I may. I'd like to add the condition that such variance would expire on the sale of this property to anyone else.
I second that.
Or change of activity.
Well, first off, I need to know my status. Do I get a chance to?
You can say all you want to, but you can't vote.
And I guess you wouldn't be able to second in that
Then
case.
I
May I
can't
have a
second.
second from somebody else?
Second.
Thank you, there you go. All right, it's been seconded. So,
I just was gonna add to that is, I mean, not only sale of that property, but maybe change of
I
activity.
think that would be better. We should say the sale of the property or the change of
Or the
the
change,
home
whichever.
occupation.
okay, so it's been moved and seconded that they be granted a variance with that condition, that it
The
will
sale of the
expire.
property or the change of the home occupation.
Well, yeah, it'll be null after that.
Not to go from yoga class to the mechanic shop.
Right,
Yeah.
although how anybody would know that until they heard the noise, I don't know.
Okay, so then, what is the practical or difficulty or undue hardship that would be caused by exceptional circumstances pertaining to that specific piece of property? I don't know what I think it is, but
They'd have to build that big walkway.
it would be an it's
That's
an incredibly
impractical.
long
Well,
connection.
That's not really the issue.
It's an option they've got.
Well, I think the issue is, I suppose they're connected, as you say, because they were advised by somebody that we take to be an expert that they needed to put the garage where it was originally because of the configuration of the hillside and the land that it's on, which
Right.
is sort of what you said, but
Sort of,
okay.
right, okay. Yeah, well, that's good. Going back to the beginning, they couldn't put the garage right up on that, and actually, they had investigated it. From a discussion I had with the appellant earlier today, I learned that they had tried to
Well, she did say
do
that here
She
tonight.
did, oh, good, okay. Then that attempt was made, and it wasn't possible because of the circumstances of the property being right on a cliff. All right? Does anybody have anything else they want to say on that one? Do we agree that that is a practical difficulty?
What's a practical difficulty?
The
The way the
fact
land lays?
that you couldn't have put the garage close enough to the house to make it feasible to have some connecting facility.
It isn't possible to.
So
because
that
of-
you in fact got around the letter of the law by having
Couldn't
this
attach
tunnel.
that garage to the house.
Right.
It wasn't possible to attach the garage to the house.
That's one of the special circumstances also.
Exceptional circumstance?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's-
that would
that's-
also be the exceptional circumstance. All right, how about property rights? Would literal interpretation of the code deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same vicinity?
Not necessarily.
I don't think there's too many more people having a yoga classes in the neighborhood, so if they want to have it, then
They might want to
they
have
can.
other kinds of classes in the neighborhood.
It does give them more privilege, than other neighbors that are enjoying in the neighborhood.
You know, without running a business, that's my main issue.
Other
is that-
people would be
It is a
able,
business.
if they had a property that they could have their home attached to their garage, they would be able to
Yeah.
have.
I know, but
it-
that
the
is-
business in there. It wouldn't, the reason that they don't have the right to do it is because their property doesn't permit them to have a house with the garage attached. Other people in the neighborhood would be able to have, it is in the code that they're permitted to have a business in the home.
In the home, yes.
Yes.
In the home.
In the home.
They can have a home
And if the
occupation.
garage is attached
They
to your
can have a-
home, and you walk through the home to get to the garage.
Right, then
you
you've
can
gotten
do
around
it.
the letter of the law, have you not?
Splitting hairs, I reckon.
That would be, yes.
Was,
Taking advantage of a loophole is what that would be doing. Okay.
would the variance be minimum?
Seems like this is an all or nothing case, isn't it?
With the restrictions that Betty suggested, yes, it would be.
Any other comment? No, okay. Sense of detriment. Would granting this variance be of substantial detriment to adjacent properties?
No.
Would it materially impair the purposes of the code?
No.
Okay. And the variance, is this of a general or recurring nature such the situation would more reasonably be handled by changing the law?
Well, apparently it's been examined fairly recently, and so this is the new law. Relatively.
Apparently, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Is there any further comment or discussion that anybody would like, anything else anybody wants to bring up? Are we ready to vote? All right. Nobody says, I'm going to just ask.
Okay, I vote no.
Yes.
No.
I would know as well.
I vote yes. So, because I think it's a reasonable use of the property. So, we have
3 noes and 2 yeses.
I'm afraid that the variance did not pass. I don't know how it would be possible to do anything differently, but it did not.
Did not. Guess they can come back.
Well, not, you could come back in a year, but
Yeah, they can come back in a year. Some
You can
people
come back in a
more
year.
frequently, although I don't know what would change.
if there's any, yeah. Okay. The last case on the agenda is number 0629V for 38 North Court Street. It's zoned B2D, and secure parking is the appellant. Steve, could you tell us, they're wanting to permit leased off-site parking for residential use. Could you tell us why it wasn't possible to do this?
I provided in the packet of information I gave you, like a tax plat, that shows the different zoning districts. The area in question to be converted to residential purposes is above where Wilson Camera used to be. It's down right around the corner right here. It's a vacant space. It's been vacant the whole time I've worked for the city. I've been up there a couple times. The city uses it as an observation point for time change weekend, Halloween, things like that. The owner lets us use the upstairs, but it's in great disrepair, and hasn't had any kind of activity, residential or commercial, in it for, looks like, decades. What Secure Parking LLC wants to do is to lease that space. I don't know if you've walked up and down Court Street. There's been a sign in the front window that the property's for lease, not for sale. And I believe that Mr. Phillips, who's here tonight representing Secure Parking, might be able to address that. But as far as I know, the property's not for sale. But to lease it, you'd only be able to lease it for commercial purposes. In other words, you could have a commercial use upstairs, but you'd have to walk upstairs to the commercial use. Parking for all commercial use is supplied by the parking garage. The B2D zoning district allows essentially 0 parking for commercial uses. The parking garage suffices for all your commercial parking. Does not suffice for any of the residential parking, though, and that's the situation here. As far as I know, excuse me, the number of parking spaces proposed will exactly match the 1-for-1 requirement. You know, for every tenant that might be housed on that second floor, there would be 1 parking spot at the secure parking lot. The secure lot is actually right behind the building and kind of on the side of the building, too. It's the large area behind where the Berry House used to be and the Court Street Diner is. Secure parking is behind there. And then secure parking also goes behind those buildings and out to Mill Street. by Domino's.
What is access from the building to the parking area? They have to go out onto the street and around and down and into the parking lot, or how do they get
Even
there?
though my best recollection of being upstairs is there is a rear exit that's not being used at the moment. You could exit out the back and go right to the parking spots out back. That's something Mr. Valentour might be able to address that too. I'm not sure if there's a secondary egress requirement for a residential use above a commercial or not. In other words, is a back way going to have to be provided when the building's renovated?
All right.
But the best of my recollection, there is a place where you can walk down a hallway and get out the back to the parking spaces. If not, you'd exit out the front door, essentially walk in front of Smith Rentals and the T-shirt shop, and then down the little alley there.
It's not very far.
The code would allow deed-restricted parking if secure parking owned the property. They could just flat, straight-up deed-restrict parking and wouldn't have to come to the board. But there's not, the problem now is, though, that they don't own both properties. They own one, but not the other. And I think also in that, that's why they're asking to have leased parking instead of deed-restricted parking. If parking's deed-restricted on secure lot, it will go with the Wilson property forever. It'll never be released. If it's leased, then once that parking, then there's the ability to release that parking, and then the use would have to cease also upstairs. No parking, no residential use. So this is a little different situation than any that we've heard really before. And I think after tonight, in the last 5 years, we've heard 53 parking cases in the last 5 years. So
Surprised it's not more.
just about half the things that we look at have to do with parking. So this one's a little different. I don't know of a situation. We've had people who owned property and wanted to lease it, or owned it and owned property next door but wanted to lease instead of deed restrict. We've never had a case where there was leased parking for leased property. An example, though, of a similar use in the uptown area, there's a group of investors that bought the Taco Bell building and bought O'Hooley's that had to come to the board because their parking was down at Snyder and Fuller's office. It was greater than 250 feet away. But they owned those properties. They bought Taco Bell, they bought O'Hooley's, and just needed a distance variance for the parking. So this one's not, this one's different.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. John Valentour, architect, Athens, Ohio. And I'm here on behalf of Secure Parking LLC. Hopefully you understood what Steve just indicated. I think you might have. I've got just a couple pictures here I want you to look at of the property. One of the goals that the leaseholders of the property have is actually to follow the guidelines for the historic renovation of buildings and hopefully get a tax credit in the process of the alterations that they want to make on the second floor. I don't have enough for everybody, but this is the building in question. This is just interior shots of it. We haven't really made definitive plans for the second floor. Pretty much only at this point in time it's been preliminary review of the possibilities of what can happen up there.
Typical Steve.
And it's likely that would be 8 to 10 bedrooms that would be created in this second floor area of the building. And that would easily be accommodated in the 80 or so parking spots, I believe, that are currently owned by the Secure Parking LLC. They have prepared a lease, and I think that if granting this variance would be obviously part of the package for how this situation would work in the event that 10 years from now, either party differed from, if the secure parking lot was sold to other parties, then these units could no longer be used unless alternate parking was provided in another location. Likewise, at the end of 10 years, if the lease agreement was not extended for Secure Parking LLC by Wilson, the owners of the building, those apartments could not be utilized unless alternative parking was provided somewhere else. I think that will be, if this is considered, one of the principal or most difficult wordings that has to be arranged for this situation. I'm just going to go through some of the reasons why we think that this should be allowed. And pretty much it doesn't relate specifically to the difficulties of the ownership of one property to the parking, but just in general terms for the benefit of the community to allow second floor residential in this location. First thing is, will granting of the variance be in accordance with the general purpose and the intent of the code for the zone in which the property is located? Well, it's the B2D zone, and the intent is to provide one parking spot per bedroom, which is required by code for residential use in the Uptown Business District. Will the variance be injurious to the area or detrimental to the public welfare? We think that providing housing on the second floors of the facilities and the commercial buildings uptown is a benefit to the community, especially if parking can be made available for that housing. The residential use above commercial in an uptown business area is actually a preferred configuration per the zoning code, at least in the B2D district uptown. What particular circumstances or conditions related to the land and/or buildings requires the variance? The building lot does not have sufficient parking. Obviously, the building is the lot. That's it. There could be no use of the second floor except commercial if parking is not secured at some other location, whether it be remote or, in this case, adjacent to that building. The Secure Parking LLC will have a long-term lease and can meet the parking needs for this property. The variance will be granted to Secure Parking LLC, not the building, and would terminate if or when Secure Parking was no longer in control of either of the properties. At that point, the use of the second floor would cease in its ability to be occupied, just as I indicated before, as apartments unless additional parking could be secured for it. Why do these circumstances not apply in general to other properties in the zone? Many other buildings either already meet current parking requirements, or they are grandfathered in, or they have remote parking in this area for the residential. There are not a whole lot of opportunities anymore uptown in this business district to find parking lots that are open for use in terms of developing additional second floors in the structures uptown. Will denial of the variance deprive the appellant reasonable use of the land and/or buildings? I think that the residential housing is a reasonable and common use for the upper floors in the Uptown Business District. What hardship will be created by the strict application of the code? The options are limited in the Uptown District right now for commercial development. And the hardship would be not being able to use what would be considered a use that would be beneficial to the Uptown Business District or appropriate for this location. As a matter of fact, that's what it used to be, was housing at one point in time, long ago. Will the variance be the minimum that would allow reasonable use of the land and/or building? The granting of the variance to secure parking meets the spirit and intent of the zoning code. Secure parking will meet the parking needs for the tenants and would end if the parking requirement could no longer be met. This is what's different and unusual about, I think, this particular case. Will the variance impair the supply of air, light to adjacent structures? No, because there would be no physical changes to the exterior of the specific building. Will the variance substantially increase congestion in public streets, increase the risk of fire endanger public safety, or substantially diminish or impair adjacent property values. Again, it would add congestion to the street. We'd have more people uptown living, which I think is a benefit to the community. The risk of fire or endanger the building, I think that statistics show that vacant structures are more of a fire hazard than occupied structures. As you can see from the pictures there, the second floor of this building is turning into a dump in itself, and that this proposal would clean it up and actually make it a habitable and a beneficial space to the building and to the community. Also, the addition of people uptown would only help the uptown business area in providing more clients to their establishments. Will the variance confer special privilege to the appellant that would otherwise be denied other people in this area? And most of the uptown buildings have upper floor residential as a non-conforming use currently. Recent regulations have made it necessary to provide more remote parking, because any new parking or any new residential use uptown, because of the way the code is written now, all has to have one-for-one parking, which makes it even more difficult to comply with. But this would not necessarily convey any special privilege to this property over the ability of any other to use it as they feel most appropriate in this district. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, if about 10 years from now, this leased off-site parking becomes unavailable, and you said it's very difficult to find any other one, so what's going to happen to the building then?
The city would have to revoke the permit for occupancy as a residential use.
So are you prepared for
That
going?
is, the owners are
doing that?
prepared to make that commitment.
Okay.
They've done the numbers. I just do the drawings to indicate that in that period of time, they feel that this project is financially viable. I mean, Guy might want to come up and add a few words here to this.
That's a great point, and I can understand why you'd be concerned about that. And basically, what would happen is the same situation that they're in now. The current owner of the building is not able to develop or use that space at all.
You need to give your name.
My name is Guy Phillips,
And your
and I live
address.
at 171 North Congress Street. Thank you. However, the lease, the owner of the building, it's in a LLC, it's a trust sort of thing. They're not interested in selling it, and he was talking about a 10-year lease. We do have a 10-year lease provisionally. After that, we have the right to renew it, and it basically goes on and on and on. And we also have first rights to buy the property. But when we put this together, the ownership was not willing to sell. You are giving the option or the variance to secure parking. It's not going to the building.
Okay, but we have to put a condition on that variance if we phrase it that way, that as long as you have the lease, maybe the variance applies.
Absolutely,
Yeah, okay.
that's fine, because I have no problem with that. This is a leased deal, but we have all the parking in the world that we would need for this. We've got, I think it's 80 spaces that we have there.
Okay.
You were jotting down some notes on your sheet. Not that I'm privy to your notes, but you must have a question, or...
No, I don't.
Were
I'm
you
just
working on the
on a
language
motion.
already?
Sure.
Pardon me?
I'm just wording the condition.
And I suspect we'll be able to meet all the conditions that you'd want to impose.
Thank you. Did you have anything else that you wanted to say?
I don't believe so. Any questions?
Any other questions, anybody?
More?
No?
We didn't address one thing. Steve said that you would. What's the nature of the exit?
I would, like I said, I listened to what you were indicating earlier, and we haven't really developed the upstairs yet, but
Well, what's your proposal?
I would think that there should be two means of egress, and one of them would have to be at the back.
Okay.
We haven't really looked at the state codes in depth at this point yet on laying out the second floor, because there's also requirements for light and ventilation. But the whole building would require a sprinkler system, and that would include the first floor as well as the second floor.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh,
All right, thank you. Well, it seems that you've had your final say, so the floor is closed. Comments are closed from the floor, and if we're ready to make a, are you going to make the motion?
I can read a motion. You all can add on to it as you will. I move we grant a variance to the property at 38 North Court Street from Section 230801D to permit leased off-site parking in the adjacent lot owned by Secure Parking LLC for a residential use where on-site or deed-restricted parking in the same ownership parking is required. Ownership is required. With the condition that the variance would terminate if or when Secure Parking was no longer in control of either of said properties.
pretty good.
Is that-
Second.
I don't know if that's their wording.
Right. Well, shall we go through the findings? Is there a practical difficulty or undue hardship that would require this variance?
There is no on-site parking, period.
Okay,
And
that's pretty, makes it hard to have anything happen.
and no
All right.
possibility of it.
And the exceptional circumstances are?
Again, the same location and
Well, and it's the last uptown property
Yeah,
that can be developed, and
and
it
it
is being
can't,
required to have parking where others are grandfathered or something
What's
else.
so ideal is the parking's right behind it. I mean,
Yeah.
geez,
Yes.
right against the building.
yeah, and the preservation of equal property rights would be what you just said, though. is
Yes, that other
yeah,
people are
right,
grandfathered
that the others have that.
or can work something else
Right.
out.
Is this a minimum variance?
I think it is, because as Roger said, the parking is adjacent to the property, and
Right.
the variance is not going to the building itself, but to the parking people, oddly. And I think it's valid to say, if they can't provide the parking anymore, or Mr. Wilson no longer wants to lease to them, then the variance would end. So that seems minimal to me.
Yeah. All right, is there any detriment involved in doing this?
no.
I think that's-
No, it'd enhance the building
Okay.
and taxes.
And is it a general recurring nature? It doesn't sound too recurring. This is the last spot.
Well, and it's a slightly different situation than we have
Yeah, it's
often when somebody is trying to
actually,
get something down the street or
You
in the same
want to have
lane.
parking a mile away or something like that.
actually, it's pretty unique. We've never had the variance sought by a parking,
Sounds workable.
does? Sounds workable to me.
We'll see.
All right, well, are we ready to vote then?
I would, yes.
All right, and
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
I also vote yes, so sounds like a good plan. Go for it. We do have two other things, other business. We want, did everybody have a chance, who was here, have a chance to read the minutes from
Yes.
last month's meeting?
Yes, it's fine.
Does everything look okay?
I move
All
to
right.
accept the minutes.
So great, and then the minutes are accepted. And then there's one other thing. Last week, because I didn't realize how many people were going to speak on something, I wound up with allowing the first of a batch of people to speak longer than they should have, and so I didn't feel I could prevent the rest of them from speaking as long as they cared to. So we had a lot of people talking for a long time. I would find it helpful if we had a list of the people who were going to speak at the beginning, so I could see right at the outset that we were going to have 15 people who wanted to make a speech. So I could say right from the outset, we have 15 people who are wanting to speak here this evening. Please limit yourselves. And I think
2 minutes.
we do have a 2-minute limitation,
two?
but
they're both raising their hands.
All I was going to suggest is, whenever we have a meeting where there's a lot of people here, it might be good if whoever's chairing the demo would just do it on a case-by-case basis, because it's possible, for one case, there's going to be one person speaking, for the next one's going to be 17.
Yeah,
And I
well,
don't know
my thought was that it would be possible to just have a sheet that stated the cases on it, and then everybody, and it could be at a podium or something at the entrance, and anybody who came in who was wanting to speak that day would just sort of put his name underneath the case that he was wanting to speak towards.
It doesn't happen
Yeah, but
very
you may
often.
change your
No, it
mind.
doesn't happen very often.
You
Well, they
might-
could change their
You have no
mind.
intention of speaking when you walk through the door, and
They don't
something may
have to
come
speak
up,
just because
and
they
then they
sign
might
it.
I
want
don't
to.
I think
think
maybe we
it
should go case
happens
by
often
case.
enough to be an issue.
Okay,
But I think it might be useful if you have 15 people there, if you said, we have 15 people who want to speak, or it appears that we have a lot of people who
Yes,
want to
I
speak.
fear-
So if
Please
someone
limit.
has already stated what you want to say, maybe you don't need to say it again.
Encourage them to keep it short. We got a lot of people here tonight. We'd like for you to keep it kind of short because, you know, we'd like you home sometime.
yeah, well, we did stay a lot longer last week than,
Amen.
But we only do this once a
I
month.
was jet lagging big time. I was not really keen on being there as
The
long as we
public
were, but
deserves it, I
Anyway,
think.
What were we talking
Okay,
about?
well,
I mean, I wasn't here. What were we talking about?
yeah, I don't know.
The fence.
Okay, well, you don't think we need a sign-up sheet in advance, then? It wouldn't be of any use to you in any case,
No,
because you
I'm
get
just
it,
saying-
you get it up there?
It's a rare enough occasion, I think you could cover it just by, I
Scouting.
mean, we pretty much know beforehand which are going to be the controversial case.
Yeah, well, you know what? No, I was blindsided on that one. I had
Oh,
no
20
clue.
Graham Drive?
Ah,
Well, like I said, if it comes to a point where there's 20 people here.
yeah, I should have guessed.
I guess what you could say is before a case, you know, how many of you are planning to speak about this particular case? And then if a bunch of hands go up, then you can vote.
Yeah, well, when I get a crowd, like, that's probably a good way to do it.
2-minute
When you
warning.
got a big crowd.
Because you're the
try
chair,
to
you
figure it
make
out.
the rules.
No, I don't make the rules. We make
Under
the
those
rules.
circumstances, you would.
Okay, all right.
When you
Okay.
give the oath, you have some kind of an idea, you don't
I
know
have an
exactly.
idea that people were going to speak.
Right. Now, we can do a sheet, I know the planning commit, I don't know if council does it, planning commission does it at their public hearings. If you want to speak, you have to sign in.
Do
So
they?
we could do that. And also, we have this little device right here
We
where
can cut them off, you mean?
these, Scott can work these from the back room, and if you want to have a 5-minute time limit, you've got a light that's on when you're good to go. You have one where you've got like a minute left, this yellow light comes on, and when your
Well,
5
that would
minutes
just
is over with,
terrify
He can do it.
people.
this red light comes on.
Do we want to go
I don't
And
there?
you'll
think-
be
I don't
shocked.
think- I don't
Do
think
we, do we want to go there?
I don't think we need to go there.
No.
So, I mean,
Although I wouldn't have minded last week. No.
we're
I
set
don't
up to,
think
we can
need to
do
go
it
there.
if you want.
No, but I appreciate your
It's
offer.
hard for people to get up and talk.
Yeah, well, some people
Some people.
have more trouble than others. Okay, I guess probably most of the time, you're right.
Yeah,
Most
it's
of the
not
time,
gonna
we don't
happen
need that, and I'll just not be jet lagging next time. All right,
Did you
thank you.
all approve the
I
minutes?
think we approved the minutes, and that was the thing that I wanted to bring up, and so, did you have
I
something?
do have one other thing. I spoke with Mr. Shaffey this weekend, and he informs me that he's going to have to tender his resignation to the mayor from the
That
Board of
was the
Zoning
second.
Appeals.
That I was thinking of.
So for anybody out there listening, or anyone that's come to a meeting and expressed the idea that they would be a very proficient board member, I'd recommend that you contact the mayor with a short resume.
Well, we did
And-
have somebody last week who indicated that he might be interested, so I'll just give him
Right,
a
so there
call.
is an alternate spot available. Alternates can participate in the conversation, they just can't vote. They fill in the case of a member not in attendance or with a conflict of interest. I think it's good training for people. Greg, for example, Mr. Lavelle was an alternate for a while, and then just, I think that experience, just being at the meetings and listening and seeing how everything goes, is really a good
Yeah, let's,
prep course for becoming a full
Steve,
member.
don't you
of the
have
board.
to advertise this so the whole city can have a chance to, if they want to volunteer, they have a chance to do this?
Hopefully, that's what I'm doing
that's
right now.
what he's doing.
Well, I mean, in the paper, maybe.
No, there's no requirement that it be advertised in the paper. We could, I guess, but to be real honest with you, even when we make our most outgoing concerted efforts to get the word out the best we can, we still have trouble getting
Yeah,
anybody
okay.
to volunteer to do those kinds of
Foolish
things.
people.
We're so special.
That's why I always thank you guys. And even though I probably won't send you a Christmas gift, thanks a lot for the whole
What
year.
about the Christmas dinner party? Are we invited?
We don't have that anymore.
Oh, okay.
Budget cuts.
Okay.
So, but seriously, I do appreciate board members going, especially some for such long tenures, It's not, having done it myself for 6 years in a small community, you don't
make any friends.
make any friends. As a matter of
Nobody invites
fact,
me to dinner.
yeah, when I left the former community I lived in, one of the township trustees wanted to escort me to the township line and move all my things to Athens, so it is kind of, what do they say, no good deed goes unpunished, so thank you very much.
Thank you
And
very
we do
much.
need an alternate member.
All right, well, I hope we find one, and I'm going to call.
Do you have the condition for that last case that you
Sort of scribbled down.
Well, if you can't find it, I've got